NGO Responsibility. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Gerald Steinberg, and I speak on behalf of the Amuta for NGO Responsibility and of the European Union of Jewish Students, the umbrella organization for 35 national Jewish student unions across Europe. Mr. Falk, your reports have contributed greatly to the immoral destruction of human rights. I would like to focus, however, on the danger of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, BDS, which poses a tremendous danger for peace and also results in the spread of hatred, violence, and anti-Semitism, particularly in universities around the world. Your claim that this is, quote, a war of legitimacy, and your endorsement of BDS are no more than calls for hatred, calls for the UN to support a movement that seeks to erase a member state and is the opposite of promoting a just peace. BDS is a movement that uses intimidation and threats and bullying to marginalize anyone who supports a genuine, lasting peace and a two-state solution. Over the past month, students who believe in a peaceful resolution of the conflict promoted aspirations of dialogue with their peers across the world. Unfortunately, this dialogue and peace is not what you and BDS supporters seek. On March 18th, the French Union of Jewish Students brought Israeli students on a one-week tour of French universities to speak about Israel beyond the conflict. After a week of successful and sometimes difficult discussions, the delegation ended its tour at the University Paris 8. There, the Israeli students were intimidated and attacked by BDS supporters who were violently calling for, and I quote, Jewish and Israeli students leave the university. In September 2013, the anti-Boers song, Shoot the Boer, was adapted and renamed Shoot the Jew, Dubula Ed Judah, and was loudly sung across Wits University, South Africa. How can you remain silent in the face of this racism? Similar incidents are happening every day at universities and campuses in Belgium, Spain, Australia, Chile, Canada, the UK, and America, and many more, making it harder and harder to establish a constructive dialogue and encourage fruitful discussions about the complexity of the Middle East conflict and genuine human rights for everyone. Mr. Falk, as a representative of the United Nations and its moral founding values, your endorsement of the BDS supporters gives legitimacy to this process and continues their immoral propaganda campaigns, destroying any hope for a viable peace process. Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you. This brings us to an end of the list of speakers in this interactive dialogue, and I will now once again give the floor to Mr. Richard Falk for his concluding comments. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the delegates in this hall who made many supportive and constructive statements, and also to the representatives of the NGO community that added a richness to this dialogue and gave welcome support to the work that this mandate has tried to do over the past 6 years. I would underscore what has been said to the effect that so much time has passed that it is up to this Human Rights Council now to move beyond rhetoric, beyond words of concern, to taking concrete steps to ensure that Palestinian rights become respected, that Israel's pattern of defiance of international law has some tangible consequences. Otherwise, as has been suggested by several delegations, the failure to implement the Goldstone report, the failure to take seriously the recommendations regarding action against business organizations that profit from dealing with unlawful settlements, cast doubt on the value of the United Nations as a source of authority in the world. So a great deal is at stake in not allowing this pattern to persist, which has contributed to the daily ordeal confronting the Palestinian people, not for just a short period, but for decade after decade, generation after generation. It is a responsibility of all of us to work toward the final just and sustainable peace for both peoples, but premised on genuine self-determination for the Palestinian people who have been kept waiting at the gate for far too long. I would also want to say in these final remarks that it is encouraging to me that the President of the Council has attempted to keep the discussion here within the limits that should be respected regarding the report under discussion. And I would also say that I hope that the comments made by several delegations, that the time has come to question an occupation that lasts beyond 5 years, in this case, a foreign occupation that has lasted 47 years, that this must be challenged and must be brought to an end, and the gap in international humanitarian law must be filled. As the Geneva Conventions are now formulated, there's no way of addressing this issue of prolonged occupation by a foreign power. It is inconsistent with the end of the colonial era that one should allow this kind of permanent disregard of elementary rights of a people living under an oppressive regime to go on year after year. And this also relates to the defiance of international law by Israel. Delegations have spoken of this defiance in relation to the advisory opinion on the separation wall. There are many other examples of this defiance, and nothing would restore and enhance the respect for the Human Rights Council more than taking tangible steps to see to it that the business activities connected with the unlawful settlements, including the consequences of the wall, are addressed in a new advisory opinion that re-examines the whole structure that has emerged in occupied Palestine. So I thank everyone for contributing to this useful dialogue, and I wish my successor great results in the coming years. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je vous remercie. Excellences, Mesdames.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the end of this interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. I would like to thank Mr. Richard Falk for his presentation and for being with us this morning. And I welcome the work that Mr. Richard Falk has done over the 6 years of his mandate as Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. And above all, for his contribution to the work and the debates of this Council. We will resume following a brief technical break